So I don't think that the next budget will be an austerity budget. I think it will be more of a stupidity budget if you actually look at the track record of the last 4 years. What is clear is that Pakistan needs a path to sustainable growth. And what is also clear is that this government hasn't found that path in the last 4 years. And history tells us that no government that is floundering for 4 years, shying away from any reform, is suddenly going to become reformist in its 5th year. It doesn't happen. I actually don't think that the government needs to negotiate much with the IMF. The government needs to show it means business. If it does that, I think the IMF will be more flexible, because all the IMF is telling the government is to reasonably balance the books, to keep the fiscal deficit within bounds. And we know that that can be done in one of two ways. First, by raising revenue, where the government has miserably failed to improve the tax base. And the evidence of that is the reinstitution of a fixed tax plan for traders that this government itself vetoed 2 or 3 years ago as a means of getting them in the tax net. But the real elephant in the room, the elephant that no one is talking about, is cost. I think if the government were to focus on cost, and if the government were to actually find out ways to slash the cost of government, then many of our problems would disappear, and we would actually find that way to growth. We would also find that way to figure out how to invest and spend more where we need to spend it. We need to spend more on defense, you need to cut costs. We need to spend more on true development, you need to cut cost. We need to spend more on health and education, you need to cut cost, right? This is because if you look at the way the government taxes us, whether that's individuals or businesses, there's a small segment of the population that actually pays tax. And remember, unlike other countries with similar tax rates, because effectively tax rates in Pakistan are now similar to the UK, US, and Scandinavian countries, people who pay that tax, when I pay my tax at the end of the month and at the end of the year, I know the state is going to give me nothing in return, right? And so the unfairness of that tax to the honest taxpayer, whether individual or an SME or a large corporate, right, is what strikes the most and makes it so hard to make money, to grow, to create jobs in this country. It is because we have saturated the amount of taxation that we can put on individuals, that we can put on companies with super taxes and surcharges. And then on top of that, by basically putting almost 200 rupees a litre equivalent of taxes on petrol, right? Because we're still not able to finance our expenditure model. So the answer is obvious. Cut cost. I don't even mean that it's just the federal government that needs to cut costs. If I were Aurangzeb, if I were Shehbaz Sharif, if I were actually the policymakers in both Islamabad and Pindi, my message outside of the political crisis would be, with people going through so much pain, at least let's focus and fix what matters in terms of our economic model and fix the cost of government. Now, I'll give you a couple of examples, right? A lot of people say that the wage bill or the civilian wage bill of the federal government is not an issue because the total cost of running the civilian government is around ₹1 trillion. This is a fallacy because the job structure, the grade structure, the pay structure of both federal employees and provincial employees is tied to each other, which means that when there is a 20% increase in the salary bill in the federal government, then all provinces at least have to follow that increase. If we look at our national salary bill of permanent government employees, excluding the military, I think this year it will actually exceed 5 trillion rupees. Okay, and this tends to grow at close to 10% a year. Now, what is interesting is that if you look at the way that 5 trillion rupees is spent, whether you look at it horizontally, so say take the 30 or 40 secretaries of government in the federal government or in any provincial government, you'll only find that 5 or 6 of them really work to the standard that they should. The rest are basically passing the day. And if you look vertically down, you go from secretaries to deputy secretaries, additional secretaries, joint secretaries, section officers, an army of staff with each of these officers. The same with ministers, tons of field staff, everyone being entitled to 40 years of salary and 60 years of pension, all funded by the taxpayer. The math doesn't add up. No state can do this. And so what's the answer? The answer is to cut costs. For example, why does every provincial government and the federal government spend roughly ₹1 billion each on maintaining staff and equipment for a printing press to print gazetted notifications? In 2026, we should just be able to print laws online, no? Why do we spend that ₹5 billion? Why are all the devolved departments in the federal government still existing? Right? Why are such redundant departments in the provincial government, such as cooperatives in agriculture, still existing? Why are there armies of people looking at boilerplate inspections in the industries department of every government? None of this makes sense. And, you know, I think where you have to give 0 marks to this government is the innovation of being able to think through how they do this. Just getting rid of one utility stores or privatizing PIA in a manner where effectively it is public sector affiliated entities that become the largest shareholder in them is not the answer to this problem, right? Have we thought of golden handshakes for people so that those that want to leave voluntarily can leave? Have we thought of performance management regimes where those that aren't working aren't entitled to a public sector salary? Have we thought of something innovative such as just keeping redundant staff at home and paying them their basic salaries so that you would still at least get rid of about 50% of the allowances that they are entitled to, plus get rid of things like electricity bills, petrol bills, and so on. And I think that done, have we thought of many different aspects like this? Because done properly, we can immediately be looking at a saving of 500 billion to 1 trillion rupees nationally. And my question is, why hasn't Aurangzeb done this? Look at pensions. Our pension bill, if you look at the federal and provincial government, is around 2.5 trillion rupees. The pensioners deserve this. But my question is, why should a grade 22 secretary finance or a grade 22 chairman FBR or any of the secretaries or any of the provincial chief secretaries and DMG and PAS officers and PMS officers not be contributing to their pensions when all of us, common citizens, are sacrificing through our nose and our teeth to keep the state solvent? Why in such an environment should Shehbaz Sharif literally today be announcing, giving himself the authority to give unlimited honorariums to staff at the end of the year? It's shocking. And what is even more shocking is that no one else talks about it. The scary part about our pension bill, and I know this personally because we took the revolutionary step of shifting all new employees to contributory pensions to build the appetite for further reform. But what I would have done if I were in KP right now is to begin the process of shifting all existing employees to a contributory pension plan. Because that is where you save costs today. And if all 4 provinces and the federal government do that today, you will save around 500 billion rupees a year. The state will still pay 3/4 of the annual pension bill through taxpayer funds. But can we not use that 500 billion? Even a country like China has shifted its employees who were on a defined benefit program where the state funded pensions through taxpayer benefits through the sort of pay-as-you-go pension program that I'm talking about. You cannot tell me that Aurangzeb, being the CEO of the largest bank in Pakistan, doesn't have the capability to understand this. It means that he and this government simply don't have the will to implement such measures. And the cold hard truth is that the IMF is not forcing them, for whatever reason, to actually take reform steps in areas like this that will actually help Pakistan's fiscal problems in a sustainable manner. You work out why this is happening, because I can't figure it out. It's not just these 2 areas. There's other areas, and we've talked about all this. There is the issue of asset monetization. We've seen it on record recently that Delhi, capital of the much richer Union of India, has just taken back the Delhi Gymkhana. But the Lahore Gymkhana, which sits on land worth 220 billion rupees, and that is state land, is funded through I want to make sure that you hear this correctly, 5,000 rupees a year annual rental for a club for the elite in the heart of Lahore, in the most expensive earth in Pakistan, possibly. Why don't we, instead of giving civil servants houses on land worth trillions in GOR and F6 and F7 and Peshawar cantonment and the railway colony in Lahore, I forget its name, and similar places in Karachi, right? Why don't we monetize these benefits? Why, instead of not keeping 100,000 cars as part of an asset inventory of government, do we not monetize the benefit of vehicle allowance and give all officers loans cut from their salary and then buy cars for them, as companies do? Because it will release around 100 billion rupees in assets, plus untold corruption in the maintenance of these vehicles and in the utilization of petrol allowances, and actually be better for the employees themselves. None of this has happened. The cost elephant in the room has not been touched by anyone, and it is we ordinary taxpayers who pay the price for it. And that is the answer to Pakistan's woes, not taking the begging bowl to IMF again.